OGN 플러스.
Okay, welcome to this week's Countdown of MonteCristo, brought to you by OGN+. So there were a lot of good games this week overall, kind of around the world, especially in Korea, more so than most. China, not so many this time, and a few in NA and EU. We're also going to take a look at a theme this week, which is a lot of number 1 versus number 2 teams for the most parts, and trying to take a look at which teams are really hot going into the second half of the season. Because this week marked the halfway point for pretty much every major league, and some teams are starting to really show at the top half of the rankings or show that they're on a streak right now to continue into the very important summer playoffs and on the road to Worlds. So we'll spend a lot of time talking about that. Let's get into the countdown. So, coming in at number 4 is a game from North America. It will be TSM versus CLG. Of course, this is the second iteration of this rivalry so far this season, and we're talking about two teams that are really battling it out in the upper echelons of the LCS. To take a look at the pick and ban to start off with, I found this draft particularly interesting.
So they go with mid lane AP poke instead of mid lane AD poke. Kog'Maw locked in.
And we see from TSM's composition here, when they see the Kog'Maw, they immediately lock into Jarvan. Now, of course, Jarvan, not so much of a priority or a high priority jungler these days, but absolutely perfect for locking down Kog'Maw in the mid and late game, especially when he doesn't have that flash up.
The flag and Pole belts are too close for his own good.
Also, in terms of itemization, Bjergsen on Azir goes for the Will of the Ancients for some more sustain off of the Spell Vamp versus the poke composition that CLG is running. What I don't like is Zion Spartan's build where he goes for Hex Drinker into Black Cleaver on Gnar. This means that he's very vulnerable in the mid game to the large amount of AoE coming out of Rumble and out of Azir, so that is a little bit questionable. Wild Turtle, also the question this week, how would he do now that he had a threat of being benched? He did very well, and it's no surprise, I think, that TSM switched back to a Tristana composition where he just cleans up off of the AoE offered by his top laner and his mid laner. In the late game, we see a beautiful combo that TSM executes with the Alistar, Jarvan, and Rumble all together, just cleanly melting through CLG, taking objective after that point, and really kickstarting the snowball to win. As a CLG fan, I really wouldn't worry about it too much. I think they tried to just exploit one of TSM's weaknesses from earlier in the season, and I think they'll adapt and move forward and look pretty good. At number 3, we have a game from Europe. It will be Fnatic versus H2K. Now, coming into this week, this is another number 1 versus number 2 matchup. A lot was going to be learned right here. Fnatic still undefeated, and they remain so. So Fnatic, looking at the picks and bans here in the draft, Reignover going again with the Olaf. Pretty early pick on the blue side this time around. I didn't like the Olaf last time, but I actually think it works really well here. A less mobile mid laner. Olaf is able to ghost, especially with the Sivir ult as well, really get on that back poke line.
Right around the side, he's gonna find Lulex, and Ryu's gonna find Reignover. Reignover finds him, takes him down.
And as we see, H2K looking for mid-game poke. Varus, Corki, Rumble, very focused around that mid-game, which means that their siege and their teleports and their team play in the mid-game have to be on point. Unfortunately, they really fall behind early in this game. And that's not necessarily a big deal, but Odoamne in particular this game was making very poor teleports compared to what we saw Huni executing with some early tower dives to get kills onto him. And then thinking that he's far behind, Odoamne starts freezing lanes instead of applying pressure. They miss their power spike, and they just have no solution to the very fast engage that Ryze, Sivir, and Olaf are offering here. I don't think their draft was as tight as it normally was either. They let this Olaf kind of get into their backlines, and they knew it was coming. So a few question marks right there, but they need to hit their power spikes better. I think that's the takeaway. I think H2K had a bad game, but it also shows that Fnatic knows how to adapt to their opponent's strategy on the fly. And when we look at Europe as a whole, we have H2K, who's very smart strategically most of the time, I think, barring this game. And then we have Origin, who's very skilled individually but lacks that macro play. But Fnatic is really the only whole package, the full package team here, and they really showed it off in the past couple of weeks. So LGD is going to opt for a Varus Ezreal composition, looking for that mid-game poke, pretty straightforward. They have a Hecarim. They can get into the back lines onto QG's Victor. Now they take Sejuani here, and I'm not really a big fan of this pick because if you have a poke comp like the one we see, Gragas goes through the draft unpicked, unbanned, and that's going to offer a lot better disengage than Sejuani. Sejuani is really a champion you want for engage, which is definitely not ideal for this particular team comp. On the other side, QG, Swift has been great on this Echo. They have Echo, Gnar, and then the Annie, so they can engage very hard with this composition. They have good poke from TNT and from Doin B as well as some good AoE damage from the Victor. So pretty well-rounded composition, but focused on the engage. TNT and Swift are the big carries on this team. In particular, I was impressed by Swift's Echo play here. And then also, take a look at TCT as well. For those of you who don't know, he used to be named Moore back when he was on LMQ in the NALCS. It's fun to see him on this new team and continuing their ascent through the LPL. In the end, I'm wondering if QG is going to be like Snake from last season in terms of their results. That is to say, very strong throughout the regular season, looking pretty good. But when they get to the playoffs, when the more veteran teams with the more veteran players start to really buckle down and try hard in a best of 5, whether they're going to be able to hold a candle to them because they haven't developed this macro play to the same degree. But still a fun series to watch. You get to see kind of both angles. First game being very team fight heavy, lots of kills. Second game, not so many kills, but definitely more map play from LGD. So Janair has been looking very good recently. They've been decisive in a lot of their wins over teams like CJ. And so there was a question, would they be able to take a game or even a series off of SKT and stop their undefeated run in the first round robin in terms of best of 3s? The answer was no. Game 2 is the one that's really, really interesting to look at because Janair actually was incredibly close to winning this game.
A great explosive cascade equalizer. Bang's gonna fall. A triple kill for Kuzan.
So let's start pick and ban. Look at the draft. In this game, Janair is going to draft a very standard composition. They have Rumble, which they've been playing all season, Gragas, Azir, Sivir, and Nautilus. So pretty versatile, good zone and choke control with Rumble and Azir, as well as good engage with the Sivir and the Gragas. Switch it over to SKT. They actually get their hands on Ryze on the red side, but instead of playing it in the top lane, they decide for Faker to have it in mid. And then they fill out the rest of the composition. Bang's back on Tristana. We've seen him play this champion when it was viable previously, just to clean up the team fights from the AoE. And that's the intention here. Let Ryze do the damage to the team, have Bang clean up. They will go back to this Kennen support, which Wolf ran earlier in the season. It's not that effective in the laning phase, not as effective as you would think here, but it does become a factor in the late game. Marin on Maokai, Bengi on Evelynn, pretty standard stuff. They have good engage to make this composition work, as well as excellent scaling compared to Janair. So when we look at this actual game, though, it's Janair getting a very, very big early lead. They outplay SKT in some of these skirmishes. They play Kuzan this game, who's a more roam-oriented mid laner than their starter GBM. He starts to make plays on the map. He starts to get ahead, and Faker and SKT start to have some problems. Now, Janair, want you to notice the 3 warding totems and 2 sight stones on this team. Janair is a team that frequently does this. They basically put more wards down than are possible to clear from the other team with this trinket and item setup, and it makes sure that their flanks are very protected. Janair is a team that likes to play with kiting, and so they need to make sure that their flanks are safe, and this is how they do it. So Janair has some great plays in this game. They get a Baron, they take out the mid inhibitor, and it looks just absolutely done. And in the course of one play, when the super minions are in mid lane, Faker actually outplays Che on the engage on Nautilus, flashes up to the high ground, kills him. Seems fine still. Janair has 4 members. They just need to poke SKT off the dragon. But then what happens is Bengi and Wolf get a very good flank engage with the Kennen and with the Evelyn, and then in a very narrow timing window, because SKT has Tristana and can melt through turrets so quickly, they're able to push up the mid lane and just a couple of seconds before the rest of the Jin Air teams respawn, take out the Nexus and win the game. Not too long, but shows SK Telecom's strength right now. Also shows Jin Air's strength. They're definitely an elite team here in Korea, capable of taking on the top players. But at this point, who's going to take out SK Telecom is the big question. I think we're going to have to wait for the KOO Tigers match. That's probably the best shot. But until then, SKT still looking like the best team in the world. Thanks for watching another episode of the Countdown of MonteCristo, brought to you by OGN+. Had some great games this last week. I think the quality of games is in general going to go up from this point forward because we have the second half of the season coming up. Teams are really desperate to go to Worlds, to enter the playoffs strong, and so we should see a lot of teams, like the Chinese teams that have a lot of games, start to really kick into gear in the coming weeks. And I'm looking forward to some good League of Legends.
That's what he said.